All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get rolling here. We've got a quorum. So welcome everyone to our webinar. I'm Jared Reimer. I'm the founder of Cascadeo. I'm based in Seattle, Washington in the United States. Cascadeo, for those who don't know, is an AWS Premier Consulting Partner and Managed Services Partner. We've been in business for 15 years now. We started out doing data center builds and network engineering and VMware projects. And when AWS came out, we realized this was the future and became experts at it very early. So we were one of the very early AWS APN partners. I think we were among the very first certified MSPs, et cetera. So today, we're going to be talking about the right way to operate infrastructure on AWS, leveraging current generation technologies. And this is often quite different from the way people have operated infrastructure in their own data centers or in simple hosting like colo or Rackspace style managed hosting environments, because you can do a lot more through automation that previously was not possible. So we're going to talk about the importance of automation. We're going to talk about the importance of leveraging data analytics with your monitoring data, and the importance of leveraging platform services from companies like AWS to accelerate things that would otherwise take a long time and a lot of work. So without further ado, let's get right in. So as I mentioned, Cascadeo is 15 years of engineering and managed services excellence. We do cloud engineering. We like to do cloud native work, meaning building on top of cloud platforms rather than just moving workloads through lift and shift virtual machine migrations. There's a time and a place for lift and shift, but it's usually our last choice and not our default choice. Because of this, we've been an AWS Premier Consulting Partner with a lot of different competencies you can see on the right there. Among them is Windows workloads, which is kind of a specialty item that we have some partners from AWS joining us as panelists on the call, Stephen and Jignesh, who are with the Windows workloads on AWS team. Cascadeo does engineering, we do managed services. We help customers within clouds and across clouds. We help customers who have not yet migrated to the cloud come up with a plan for doing so correctly and thoughtfully. And then finally, in addition to our professional services and managed services division, we have our Cascadeo.io platform, which we're going to show you in a bit. This is from years and years of learning about how to operate other people's infrastructure correctly at scale. And we've essentially turned a lot of what we're going to discuss into a SaaS offering that you can use if you wish to accelerate your AI-assisted infrastructure operations. Another couple cool things. We won MSP of the Year last year. We won an innovation award. We're on the MSP 500 for CRN, best practices from Frost and Sullivan. And we were written up in Forbes because of our Cascadeo.io platform. So we've had some good accolades beyond just 100 and some odd major enterprise customer success stories. Our customers tend to range from mid-enterprise to Fortune 50 with heavier weight towards mid-enterprise companies that have some number of applications they care about, some infrastructure they care about, but maybe they're not all the way at full cloud adoption yet. So today, first, why AI ops in the cloud and why now? Okay, so why is this important and why is it timely and how is it relevant to you, either the business leader or the technology leader or the developer? We're going to do a couple of really quick 1-minute customer case studies. Here's the customer, here's the problem they had, here are the tools we use to help them solve it. Here's how you could go about achieving the same outcomes if you wish to do so and have similar scenarios. A really important theme is the central nervous system for operations. So very, very few companies have this and even fewer get it right. This turns out to be incredibly rare, but incredibly powerful if you have infrastructure and applications that you care about and or your customers and employees depend upon. Next up, Amazon's AI ML platform services are game changers, plural. They are one of the most disruptive sets of innovation that I think has come across in my lifetime. And we're going to talk about how you can leverage those either directly as platform services or via Cascadeo.io to take advantage of this for improving your infrastructure operations and getting better at kind of lights out, hands off, self-tuning, self-healing, cost-optimized cloud infrastructure. That gets us to Cascadeo.io. Of course, our pitch here is don't reinvent wheels and rebuild this. We've already built it and you can use it for free. But if you want to rebuild it from scratch, we'll show you roughly what it takes to do it. And there's lots of people that, for whatever reasons, choose to build their own, Kafka deployments and analytics platforms and things. But we think for most companies, that's probably engineering overkill. And in general, we tend to think that for most companies, buying SaaS, a finished software as a service product, is usually the right answer to most problems. If you can't buy SaaS, perhaps you want to buy a platform service like from AWS. The last resort typically is infrastructure as a service, which would be virtual machines, either running on a cloud platform or say on VMware or in a data center on bare metal. We do have moderated Q&A at the end. And as I mentioned, we have some awesome folks from AWS joining us as panelists. You can submit questions anytime you like through the Q&A feature in Zoom. We're going to do those at the end, and we're going to make sure we allow time for that. This is a 1-hour event, but if we need to go over a little bit because there's questions, I'll stick around and try to make sure that we get everyone's questions covered. Okay, so here we go. Why do we need a different approach to this, right? Like, what's wrong with the way we've been operating infrastructure for the last 40 years since the dawn of corporate IT and systems operations? First of all, it's no longer a castle with a moat around it with a gate that is the firewall. The security perimeter and the interdependencies between applications and external systems, external APIs, software as a service applications, it's almost impossible to keep up with it, and it's always evolving and changing. So instead of a moat around the castle, you have an ever-growing, evolving spider web with links between applications coming and going and new applications being introduced into the mix, sometimes without your knowledge. This is often referred to as shadow IT, where well-intentioned employees might deploy something specifically because they need to get their job done outside of your cloud governance and data governance framework. And that's super common in the era of click to buy SaaS with a credit card or cloud with a credit card. And we see a lot of that. So the topology of your network, of your infrastructure, of your systems, of your data flows, that is constantly in flux now. And that was not true in the physical data center. Next one, no one has to be convinced of this in the COVID era, is that the world has moved to digital business. I expect everything on my iPhone. I think most iPhone customers do. And if it's not supported on iOS, I probably won't buy it or use it. That should tell you how dominant those platforms have become. Contrast that to the day when Windows on the desktop was the platform system-wide, or Solaris on Sun hardware in the data center was the platform. Nowadays, it's all about digital. It's all about mobile. It's all about customers being able to get what they want, where they want it, in whatever venue they happen to be in. And that's just a must-have, right? Unless you're a local barbershop or something. If you have any regional scale, multi-site, I think this is a must-have. Next one is most companies got stuck in the era of having really heavily siloed IT processes and operations, meaning different departments would run different apps, different teams would have different tools. There was no commonality in the way things were deployed and operated. And this led to a lot of duplicate effort and infrastructure, but it also leads to a lot of unnecessary complexity, which of course is one of the root causes of security problems and cost overruns. And then finally, exponential data growth is a big thing, right? So a lot of people don't appreciate this, but the volume of data that humans are producing right now within applications and outside of what we think of as IT applications is on a super exponential curve. And a lot of this is because of the advent of 4K video, streaming, and also handheld mobile devices that can record 4K. But this trend is only going to accelerate. So as we get to 5G, AR, VR applications, even better camera technology, 3D, holography or whatever, you can imagine the data curve continuing to climb exponentially, not linearly. I don't think it has never plateaued, and I don't think it ever will. In the entire course of human history, the rate of growth of the data set that humans produce keeps endlessly climbing. And then finally, your competitors are going to do this. They may not do it today, they may not do it tomorrow, but eventually everyone is going to do this. So if you believe that and you accept that, then you'd probably be best off getting ahead of the curve rather than being behind it and having to try to play catch up in a potentially disruptive scenario where a new entrant into your space all of a sudden changes the whole landscape, perhaps in the way that, say, if you were a grocer, all of a sudden the Amazon acquisition of Whole Foods was a wake-up call that the world had just changed under your feet. Same with taxi cabs and Uber and Lyft. The taxi industry should have seen that coming and should have built their own apps and been more customer friendly. There never should have been a window for an Uber or a Lyft to exist. If you believe that, then I think you can relate that to your own business and assume that someone will eventually be the Uber of your space. So here's the cheat sheet if you want the short answer, okay? Repeatability is absolutely critical in cloud. If you cannot repeatably automatically recreate your systems that are running in the cloud, then you're doing it wrong. If you can't provably recreate the running system state for your production systems, you fail the test. This is not just a DR test. This should be your everyday deployment methodology, and you should exercise it frequently. If you don't want to go through the work of fully automating and orchestrating the deployment of apps and configuring them, that's fine. There's a time and a place for that, and there's a time and a place to not make that kind of investment. Then you can at least containerize them so that you're not dealing with an endlessly growing fleet of virtual machines, each of which has a heavy operating system and a corresponding operating system license, huge memory footprint, baseline wasted CPU and disk footprint, et cetera, okay? Again, IaaS is your last resort. Don't buy VMs if you don't have to. If you have to do it as a stepping stone or as a permanent solution, then by all means do, but you should evaluate every other option before you do that, just as you should evaluate every other migration option before you do a lift and shift. Next up, AI/ML assisted operations is super important. A lot of people don't know the difference between monitoring and alerting and remediation because they only know Nagios or SolarWinds or Xenos or a conventional IT monitoring tool where all of those functions are kind of tied together. If you decouple them, you can do much more powerful things, and we're going to show that in a minute. Among them is you can look for anomalies. So you can look for ways that systems are performing differently than they normally do, even if they're not out of spec yet. Just the fact that they're not doing what they should be doing and appear to be doing something new and different is usually a leading indicator of trouble, because most IT systems for business do the same thing all day, every day. Predictive analytics are a big part of that, right? So predicting what we think the system is going to do next, what we think its network activity and processor activity, disk activity, database activity, making those predictions, and then testing those against the observed measurements. That's how you detect anomalies and how you get ahead of problems before they become outages. So the dream scenario is we detect things that are going sideways before they become service incidents or outages. We address them either programmatically or maybe with bug fixes or software changes, but we reduce the number of service impact or outage scenarios dramatically because we get better at detecting and fixing things before they fail. Contrast that to the way most monitoring systems work, which tend to wait for a failure and then alert after the fact. Last thing, a lot of people say, I moved to the cloud and it's more expensive than I thought. And that's probably because you did it wrong. So typically, if the bill is higher than you expected, or it's not meaningfully better than what you had before, it's usually because you tried to recreate your data center on a cloud platform instead of fully embracing and leveraging cloud platform technologies and architectures. For example, if you're running your own Microsoft SQL Server cluster on EC2 with EBS, there should be a very good reason for doing that. Otherwise, you should probably just buy RDS, because why would you waste your time and headspace and effort and attention running something that can be delivered to you as a finished service? And honestly, those types of platform services, typically the uptime, the operational excellence, the security hardening is better than what most companies can achieve themselves, even if they try really hard, which most don't. So our belief is if you can buy platform services to displace infrastructure, that's usually a good low-hanging fruit way to get better, faster, cheaper, less ops, less toil, kind of get the benefit of the cloud. So here's a customer, Zenmonix. They sell software to credit unions and mid-sized banks. They had Xenos as their data center monitoring, and they wanted to migrate to our platform for AIOps. They were also moving their app to Kubernetes. So they deliver this as SaaS as well as a box software product. So rather than going and rebuilding a whole monitoring system or trying to reinvent one, they used our platform for that, and we enabled Kubernetes support for that to support this customer. They also use our managed services for 24/7 ops so that they don't have to run it. And after we got them on board, we were able to cut their TCO on operating their cloud applications by about 60%, just by doing the obvious tuning and optimization and scaling and helping them through the well-architected review process to optimize what had been built. Radio Wealth Finance is a leading company that offers loans in the Philippines, where a good chunk of Cascadeo's team and customer base happens to be. So they have three things from Cascadeo. They have Cascadeo.io, which is our AIOps platform. They have managed services, and they do well-architected reviews. This is an AWS program for helping clients to study objectively their cloud deployments and to iteratively improve them with the help of a partner like Cascadeo, who might know to look for things that you as the customer might not know, because we've seen hundreds of these, and for many customers, this is their first time working in cloud environments. They were able to cut their cloud expense by 30% a month, so they're a pretty happy customer too. And then finally, Globe, who, full disclosure, is our major investor, also had us leverage this platform around billing and consumption data. They are a massive AWS customer, one of the largest in Asia. And they also do a lot of AWS resale. And unlike other resellers, they don't want to give their customers just a line item, here's your Amazon cloud consumption charge. They want to give you hyper granular accounting, billing, and insights on how to optimize, how to be smarter, how to better secure, like do more than just report, right? Add value on top of the report that you would get from the cloud provider. So we took the Amazon billing and consumption data, we took the customer's performance data, like what is their system actually doing versus what's provisioned, put that all into the same analytics platform. And now we can do things like tell a customer, you're spending way too much money on a system that rarely gets used and that apparently has only a couple of people talking to it and that moves almost no traffic. Maybe we can scale it down, or maybe we can decommission it, or maybe we can just run it on the work hours and turn it off after hours. There's lots of things we can do. But the dream here is to make not just local currency billing possible in the Philippines and beyond, but to provide value beyond just resale, right? Because resale is undifferentiated, but if you're the customer's trusted cloud partner and advisor, that's a much stickier customer relationship. So this is something we've built on top of Cascadeo.io for Globe Telecom. And for those who don't know Globe, they're the leading telecom provider in the Philippines with about 90 million subs. So roughly Verizon size, I think, in terms of customer base. Okay, so here's key insight number one. Just when you think you get your monitoring stuff right and you think it's done, you're wrong because something changes. And by this, I think of them as inputs and outputs. So there are things that are feeding telemetry or should be feeding telemetry, like AWS gives you CloudWatch metrics and events and things. Xenos or SolarWinds or Nagios gives you, local data center, legacy monitoring data. You might have a tool from your SAN vendor that gives you storage array metrics. Windows has perfmon data up the yin yang. There's tons of fantastic data buried in Windows that almost no one ever bothers to use. I'm shocked at how poorly instrumented most enterprise Windows deployments are. Same with SQL Server, by the way. Buried in there are tons of metrics that never get used by most customers. Our approach is we don't know what's important, so we're going to collect everything because it's cheap and easy to do that now, and we're going to sort it out later. Because sometimes the data that you think is unimportant is actually the most important of all. You don't know what you need until you need it, and if you wait until you need it to start collecting it, you've waited too long, and now you're 2 weeks behind the curve. So the inputs and outputs are going to change. The outputs might be humans getting paged. They might be automated remediation, like a script that restarts or redeploys something. They might be notification. They might be an email, a Slack message. We don't know, right? We don't know what the future holds. Apple Watch came out. Now you can get notifications on your watch. We don't know what the outputs are going to be any more than we know what the inputs are going to be. So key insight number two is that you need a platform, an analytics platform that doesn't change because the inputs and outputs keep changing, okay? So in this case, we're showing you an AWS account, customer account here on the left, and you can have multiple inputs. This is the Cascadeo.io interface for doing this. You can have multiple inputs like other cloud platforms, legacy data center, legacy network, et cetera. These all get fed into a common analytics backend, which is built on Influx data and AWS platform tech. And then you can pick outputs. So this customer has Cascadeo's operations center doing operations and responding to alerts. They get notified through Slack, and they also have a group that prefers email notifications for whatever reason. So we actually send the relevant alerting data to email. This is all configurable on the fly. So as the inputs and outputs change, as you add more cloud services, accounts, vendors, SaaS services, as you want to wire up more of your legacy environment, these are all click to deploy. with supported platforms. And for platforms that are not supported, we can typically do them quickly as custom integrations. So Cascadeo.io is meant to solve this specific problem because we kept seeing customers fumble with it and try to solve it themselves at great expense. And we thought, if everybody has this problem, maybe somebody should just solve it systematically. So think of it like SaaS that solves the problem we're describing. So you can connect SQL Server and Kubernetes and AWS, and there's a Windows agent for getting all the perfmon data out of Windows. We have our own synthetic monitoring for monitoring your web endpoints and services and SaaS service endpoints. We integrate with Xenos if you have a legacy data center and VMware or bare metal systems or a network. So there's a bunch of things that are pre-integrated. And then for customers that need something beyond that, we can do custom integrations really quickly because of the plugin architecture, right? Because it's designed for lots of different inputs to be connected to it. So what do you get out of it? First of all, this helps with cost optimization dramatically, right? There's a lot of reasons for this, but the most important one is if you don't have the data to begin with, you're just guessing, and guessing is no way to manage infrastructure, right? You don't want to be trial and error. Let's see if the instance can run at a lower instance type or size or cost. Well, how do you know that that's a good decision? I don't know. I just took a look at it and I thought maybe I'd try it. That's the wrong way to do this. You can completely model it with data, and you don't even have to be an expert to do it anymore. The systems do the work for you. Another one that's really cool is that we can onboard most customers same day. So typically when you onboard with an MSP or with any sort of analytics platform, it's weeks or months of work. We've automated this to an extent where most customers can be up and running within a couple of hours. And we're happy to white glove onboard you if you wish, or you can just log in and try it, sign yourself up and connect your own infrastructure without ever talking to a human or even putting in a credit card number. You can just log in and go. So you get, among many other useful things, you get AI and ML assisted operations built right in for free. And typically by the third day after you're onboarded, we have collected enough data that we can start to help with insights beyond the obvious, right? So instead of alerting after the fact, we can start to say, hey, something's different. This system, this database that's always running at 10% CPU load and 10% network IO capacity, all of a sudden it's working way harder and it's getting busier by the minute. Maybe somebody should take a look before it falls over, right? So I think, in general, this is probably the primary benefit, is that you get a lot of capability that you likely don't have any way to achieve otherwise. If you want, we have our managed services team. Chris Ellis is on the call here with us. He heads up the US side of that. This is a 24/7 globally distributed ops team that does tier 1, 2, 3 support. You don't have to use it, but if you want to offload some, most, or all of your IT infrastructure operations work, up to and including application level support for the right customers and right projects, have a talk with us after the meeting here, and we will fill you in on that. Okay, so how does it work? In the cloud, we deploy a tiny little virtual appliance into the customer cloud account, but in a completely separated VPC. There's no network path between the hardened virtual appliance and the customer's infrastructure or data. This little hardened VM collects metrics from things like CloudWatch, analyzes them at the edge, bundles them up, and then, whoops, sorry, I went forward, ships them over the internet, over SSL, encrypted, to the platform where all of the analytics, AI, ML, alerting, reporting, forecasting, predictive analytics, all this stuff happens in the cloud. So very little infrastructure in the customer environment. Almost all of the heavy lifting is done in the cloud. For customers that have on-premise or private cloud or managed hosting or complex networks, or they have physical assets that they care about, like security cameras or printers or fax machines or security, door controllers, anything you can dream up, there's probably a way to monitor it with Xenos, because Xenos also supports Nagios plugins. And for those not familiar, Nagios has been around since, I don't know, maybe 20, 30 years now. And there's thousands of these plugins for every device that can possibly be connected to the internet, power devices, air conditioners, you name it. Anything you can dream up, somebody's probably written a Nagios plugin. So you can monitor anything. And similarly, the data gets shipped, metrics and events, over the internet, over SSL, one way from your environment into the platform, where we combine it with the data we get from the cloud platform. So if you happen to be in transition, or if you are a permanent hybrid cloud customer, you don't have to replumb all of your alerting and remediation and run books and ticketing. You don't even have to worry about like upgrading or managing your own analytics platform for operations. You just have to connect things, and when you're done moving them or they're decommissioned, you can just disconnect them. So this is what we talk about around inputs and outputs. For customers that will not allow, for security reasons or policy reasons, a virtual appliance, we also support Blue Matador for agentless data collection. There's a small fee because this is a third-party SaaS service, but it works really well. This is basically just a cloudified version of this run as a SaaS by Blue Matador. Okay, so why do you need this? Because most of you probably do not have yet what we call the central nervous system, right? So you might have hands and feet and eyeballs and arms and legs and things, but usually they're not coordinated. They're not tied to any sort of spine or brain. They are left to operate autonomously. So your monitoring systems, a lot of companies have many of them in different ways. They're each monitoring some subset of the problem. One of them monitors storage. One of them monitors the network. A different one is monitoring application performance. A different one is used for database tuning. This is the wrong way to do it, right? Because you can't have all these tools with their own little private data sets and silos and not have that data become available downstream. If you keep the data siloed in the monitoring tool, you're not getting the value out of it, right? In fact, usually it just dies there. So one of the key things here is to decouple your monitoring, which is the data collection piece of it, from your analysis and alerting. Now, you still want to do some edge alerting, meaning your monitoring tool like SolarWinds or Xenos or Nagios or whatever it may be, that still should be capable of generating an alert if it's certain that something is broken. Like, I just lost reachability across this network link. You should go ahead and alert for that. But there's a lot of things that those kind of pass-fail monitoring tools miss. They tend to wait for a threshold to be exceeded or something to fail, and then they raise their hand and say something is wrong. What we want to do is get as far ahead of that as we can to give ourselves time to fix the thing before it becomes service impacting and costs somebody money. Some companies have chat ops and ticketing systems. Some of them use WhatsApp. Some of them use Slack. Some of them have 10 different IM tools that aren't really connected. Some companies make their employees use Teams. I'm sorry if you're one of them. It's not Microsoft's best product. We tend to think Slack is the right choice, but whatever it is you're going to use, pick something, standardize on it, and mandate the use of it, especially for critical infrastructure operations. There should be no ops activity that's not logged to something like Slack so that your teammates can understand what changed, who changed it, and why they changed it. A lot of people think dashboards are pretty things you put up on the wall. Ideally, the dashboard is something you never, ever need to look at. It's not meant to be wall candy or marketing material. It's not meant to solve all your problems. And if you're staring at a dashboard all day to operate your systems, you're doing it wrong. The dashboard really should be brought to you, or the relevant portions of it, when there's an issue. And that's what we attempt to do with Cascadeo.io, meaning we don't tell you, go look at the dashboard. We try to bring you the visualization of the problem and the relevant data and say, look, the CPU is getting busier here. We don't know why, but it never did this before. What would you like to do about it? Canaries. So canaries are simple, right? You need some synthetic transactions to verify that the systems are actually doing what they should be doing. It's not enough to know that it's up, meaning it's reachable on the internet. It's not enough to know that the web server is running. You have to be able to exercise, for example, the database on the back end to know that the system is working. It's amazing to me how few companies get that right. Another hard one, a lot of companies build on proprietary stuff. That's not always wrong, but you should do it with your eyes wide open about what that means long-term, and maybe consider ways that you might leverage open source. And one thing that I think AWS does a fantastic job at is leveraging open source, making that available, productizing it in consumable formats, but still giving you the freedom to run your own if you don't want to buy the productized versions of it. So I think it's the best of both worlds there. And it really is a good way to move away from, especially, hyper expensive proprietary things like Oracle that I think most customers would rather move on from. Another one, very few companies get good at code repositories and CI/CD and automated deployments. They have people manually deploying and configuring applications in the cloud. This is very, very bad, and it should be avoided at almost all costs. If your humans are logging in and running Windows wizards to patch and update things, and if you have VMs that stick around for years, that's bad news, because the odds that those machines are going to be compromised at some point are pretty much 100%. And the odds that you can recreate the system state decrease the longer the system runs because people keep making manual changes to it. So the key here is really to invest in automation orchestration and/or containerization if you're not going to go, all the way down the path of building CloudFormation for everything. Configuration management is a big deal. A lot of companies get this wrong. Same deal, right? It's fragmented. Maybe they have a CMDB for their network, but not for their servers. Maybe they have it for their apps, but not for the operating system. You've got to have some common framework for understanding the state of things. Ideally, that's the code repo, by the way. So in a perfect world, all of the system state is stored as code so that you can recreate the whole system from scratch. And all you're doing is pulling configuration parameters out of a key value store to populate the deployment's configuration. You're not having anyone log in and press buttons. And then the holy grail, of course, is self-healing, AI/ML assisted. Almost no one, even really smart companies, have this because they think it's out of reach. They think it's too complicated. They think it's not for them. My hope today is to convince you that maybe that's not true. So if you try our platform, Cascadeo.io, we think that we solve all of these problems really elegantly. So monitoring on all the major cloud platforms and your on-prem and private cloud infrastructure. We provide all of this amazing AI/ML analytics tech for free in the cloud. We run it, we build it, we operate it. We give you the output from it. And we also support pass-through from external sources. So if you have something like Blue Matador doing data collection for you, or Xenos or SolarWinds or whatever, we're not going to rip and replace. We're going to meet you where you are and integrate with the tooling you've already built. We think ChatOps is critically important. I think it's often a big mistake to have everyone dial into a phone bridge, and then the new person on the call has to be caught up in the middle of an outage. The new person should be able to log into, say, Teams or Slack and go through the history and understand immediately what's going on and what's been done, what changed, who changed it, why they changed it, et cetera. And we try to instill this with customers by having our own ops team interact with them if they're managed services customers in exactly that way. By default, we use Zendesk for ticketing. We think that's a great SaaS option. There are plenty of others. A lot of companies use Remedy or ServiceNow or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Just pick one and standardize on it. And if your vendor says you have to use my ticketing system, I would probably push back on that. I think the era where vendors can make employees use their IT systems for their convenience is sort of waning. We try to integrate with your ticketing system if you already have one, and if you don't have one, we integrate with Zendesk and give that to you. Dashboards, again, I don't think these are nearly as important as people think they are, but I do think it's helpful to deliver a visualization at the time that there's a possible incident. So we try to bring it to you. We don't ask you to go log into the portal and look for yourself. And then finally, we do provide basic synthetic transactions against public web service endpoints. So if you have SaaS services or you run your own apps, like you have your own .NET app on the web that you want to monitor the health and performance of, we can actually deliver that as part of the platform as well. So now we're going to give you a peek behind the curtain. And don't worry, this is not enough to recreate the whole thing, but it will show you conceptually how it works. And particularly how we leveraged AWS AI/ML platform tech to build this, because this would not have been possible in the time frame that we've built it without this amazing platform technology. And I think this is a great showcase of the power of that for companies like yours and ours. So first, this is a scenario where we are collecting a lot of different data from a lot of different things, and we are plumbing that data into a data lake. S3 is Amazon's bucket storage platform, very low cost mass storage for huge amounts of data, right? Kinesis is sort of like Kafka for those who understand streaming analytics stuff. So this is data coming out of the CMI, which is the virtual appliance, streaming into Kinesis from all of the different customer deployments. So there might be thousands of these things streaming data in. And instead of having to worry about scaling this or this, those just scale infinitely by themselves as platform services. So Dynamo is super high performance for real-time stuff that customers see and feel and touch. And then all of our web interface is serverless. So there are no VMs in the cloud running our application, none of them. All of it is built on serverless. In particular, we use API Gateway, Lambda, and S3. So when you log into the portal, like set things up, we hope it's infrequent because we aim to bring the data to you. You're actually not talking to our servers. you're talking to code that we wrote, which is then operated on top of Lambda by AWS. So we don't have to think about how many load balancers we need and how many connections per second, how many, I don't know, worker nodes behind running my PHP, like all that stuff just goes away. And we think this is the way all applications are going to be built in the future. So take some Legos and assemble them into the thing you need instead of building each of these things and all of the underpinning infrastructure. Like to do this yourself, you have to have routers, switches, firewalls, load balancers, web application firewalls, app servers. You have to have a ton of infrastructure that you have to keep running all the time. And that just disappears if you build on top of Lambda. So we believe this is super, super important, and all enterprise apps in 10 years will be built this way. We also use Athena, Glue, Data Catalog, and our favorite one is SageMaker for anomaly detection. So SageMaker is one of the cool AWS AI/ML platform services that you probably have heard about in the news. If you haven't, I would check it out. It's amazing. And it really democratizes technology that previously was inaccessible to mere mortals. So what about Windows? Okay, so this is a customer scenario. They got a bunch of Windows servers and SQL servers. These have little agents installed on them to collect local metrics. There's optionally a virtual appliance in the customer's cloud environment in a separate VPC. The data gets shipped one way and again gets bundled up, shipped over SSL. Kinesis ingests, and it gets written to a time series database, which is a special kind of database for exactly this type of bulk metrics collection. So time series data is when you take the same measurement over and over again on an interval, like every 5 minutes, we're going to record the temperature, or every 30 seconds, we're going to see how busy the CPU is as a % of its maximum, right? And then we have a data lake for long-term archival of the data. One thing that's cool here, the data from SQL Server, the data from Windows, the data from CloudWatch, this would be hypervisor down, all of that data, as well as any data from your legacy environment, all goes into the same place. And for most companies, this is a big aha moment because they never thought to do that. All of their monitoring data and telemetry gets siloed. So all of a sudden now, all the data is in one place, and you can do really magical things like figure out correlated signals between different systems. So for example, when the app server is busy, this database gets busy as well. And the system can figure out those kinds of relationships just by studying how those two signals move without being told or taught. Okay, so this is really, really important because in the past, we used to try to build these dependency graphs and they were always wrong and out of date. And half the time, if something broke, you'd get 50 alerts from 50 different things that were seen to be broken when they all had a common cause and they were all correlated. So this is the kind of thing that gets a lot better with AI/ML assisted operations, because the systems do a good job at learning and predicting what's supposed to happen when things are in normal steady state operations. This is another cool one that we're working on. So this is all about configuration management. Okay, so how do we make sure that what is running in customer cloud environments is what the customer expects, and that they don't have rogue instances, or they don't have well-intentioned or malintentioned employees doing things that break their security policies? The answer is you need to have a framework for this. And unfortunately, a lot of those frameworks are very proprietary and vendor specific. Our ambition here is to build this into a cross-cloud, multi-cloud solution for customers so that you don't have to worry about which environment these things are running on. We support all of them as first-class citizens, just as we do around monitoring and alerting and AI/ML assisted operations. So what do you get if you do it? We support all the different cloud platforms. We support on-premise. We integrate with third-party tools on-prem and cloud. We automate the deployment of the tooling, so you don't have to hire us to set it up for you if you don't want to. We have automated thresholding, so instead of you going in there with the knobs and trying to figure out how noisy is noisy enough, we do all that automated, through AI/ML assisted tuning. We do automated notifications to the venues of your choice: Slack, PagerDuty, email, what have you. And of course, the big one is that you get the power of Amazon AI/ML technology working on the data that we've collected. We also can provide bespoke managed services and customized professional services to help you with your cloud stuff. If you wish, you're not required to use that to use the platform. And finally, the dream is whatever breaks, just fix it by itself and page me if you can't fix yourself. That's where we're ultimately going with this, right? What we don't want is to be manually fixing and reacting. We want the systems to self-heal, even if that means fully redeploying themselves. And if that doesn't work after some number of tries, then and only then should we page somebody out of bed. That's really the end game. Okay, so hopefully you believe that this is all the new normal and this is the way it's going to be forever now, because the genies come out of the magic lamp and there's no way to go back. Cascadeo.io is free to use SaaS that does the analytics magic we talked about. Again, you can try it for free. You can log in, connect your own systems. If you want help, we would love to help you be successful in that onboarding. So please reach out to us if you have any questions. I think a really important thing is that a lot of people focus too much on legacy systems, and they tend to overbuild, over provision. They tend to overinvest in things that maybe should just be sort of phased out or replaced. And our idea is maybe you should divert some of the investment away from legacy stuff, call it good enough if it really is good enough, and focus on building for the future. Because in the end, business agility and the ability to adapt to a rapidly changing world, I think is going to be one of the key drivers of who wins and who loses in business. And finally, we think this is really important. So what makes your business special? Like, I know what makes Cascadeo special, and I think you know what makes your business special. If what you're doing in IT is not part of that special thing, usually you just want to buy SaaS, right? If there's a SaaS tool that does it, and it's not part of what makes you special, this is a good chance to refocus on what is special and what is differentiated. You don't make your own electricity, right? Let the power company do that. You shouldn't be making your own ticketing system or running your own Exchange servers for email and calendaring. That's a waste of time, and it doesn't create any business value. So why not just let somebody else deal with it so that you can refocus on your customers and on the things that hopefully are going to be, the big winners for your company tomorrow. So here's your cheat sheet. You got to do monitoring. You got to get good at analytics. This is a must-have. It gets easier every year, by the way, because the technology keeps getting better. But now's the time. We love AWS AI ML platform tech. I think this is just completely disruptive innovation in computer science. We're really happy with it, and we've decided to go all in on that as our platform for Cascadeo.io. Windows is a goldmine of data that almost nobody uses. It's embarrassing how bad the instrumentation of a lot of Windows deployments is. So it's easy to get the data out of there, guys. And the data is so valuable. You would be amazed what you can do with that data. Our platform is free. We do the cloud transformation work. So if you want to get good at cloud, get good at automation, get good at monitoring and operations, we're the team that helps with that through professional services and managed services. And then finally, if you would like to talk with one of our many cloud architects or try having managed services for 24/7 operations of your support, we would be happy to arrange that for you. We'd even offer a free month of managed services for those who wish to sign up. So at this point, we are going to go to open Q&A. And we've got a few folks from AWS on the line who I'm hoping can jump in and give us some additional insights. So I'm going to go through the questions here and pick a few. Okay. What is the best way to move my company's custom .NET app to the cloud? That's a tough one. So I think the good news is you're not inventing anything that hasn't been done before. The bad news is there's more than one way to skin the cat, right? So usually you would want to find a reference architecture that AWS has published or that Microsoft has published or that a similar company that you trust has published that shows something that's very similar to your current application architecture and environment, and then modify that CloudFormation to build something repeatable. What you don't want to do typically is lift and shift, which is just a VM copy. And what you don't want to do is hand build Windows VMs that you expect to run forever. I'm also going to open this one up to our friends from AWS because they are experts on exactly this subject. So Stephen or Jignesh, I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that.
Yeah, absolutely, right. So there are multiple ways to move your custom .NET applications to AWS, and it totally depends upon your business requirements, right? At AWS, we would like to offer options to our customers, and let them pick which is the best fit approach for their business requirements. So having said that, there are three ways, right? You can rehost, or you can re-platform, or you can refactor, depending upon how much time you have, how much budget you have, and what are your business requirements. So you can go for elastic beanstalk, right? Um, it is one of the easiest way to move your .NET applications to AWS. The next option you have, you can use you can containerize your .NET applications, and now we offer 4 different ways to host and run your containerized .NET applications on AWS. Most of you guys, you are familiar with ECS and EKS. In addition to that, last reInvent we announced you can use Lambda to host and run your containers. And very recently we announced a brand new service called AppRunner that is very, very interesting, offer by AWS. So there are 4 ways you can containerize your application, and you can quickly get out of your data center. We also offer a tool called App2Container, which can help you to accelerate your containerization efforts. And then finally, if you are ready to refactor, you can go completely serverless with Lambda or with Fargate.
This is Steve. The other thing I'm going to add to that is that AWS invests in this, right? So we can help offset the cost with Cascadeo and help sort of customers with that data collection to make that decision whether it is best to migrate or modernize.
All right, excellent. Next question, here we go. I moved some Windows VMs to AWS and the cost is higher than I had planned. Does your system help with that? I think the answer is yes, in 2 different ways. So first, we collect operational telemetry. This is real performance data showing how busy different parts of the system are, like the processor or the disk or the network. And by doing that, we can tell if systems are over-provisioned, so they're too large, which is very common, by the way. That's a super common problem because people try to make them the same size that they were in the data center without accounting for the platform differences and the cost differences. So over-provisioned VMs are probably the #1 biggest area where we see this. The other one is over-provisioned storage, right? So the goal of solving this is to save money. The way that you solve it is with data. So the 2 data sets that are relevant are the performance data and the billing and provisioning data. So what did you buy and how much of it are you using? Because cloud consumption is typically use it or lose it, meaning if you buy an hour of EC2 instance time, you're going to pay for the hour whether that instance is busy or idle. So there's a big performance penalty or cost optimization penalty for running VMs endlessly that are idle off hours, for example, but almost everybody does it. And it's not that hard to put them on a schedule. I mean, if nothing else, you can have them turn themselves off at the end of the day and turn themselves off and on in the morning. I mean, that's just 101 level. Another thing we find is that a lot of companies don't clean up after themselves. So they move stuff, they have temporary deployments, temp systems, lab environments, developer environments, and no one ever does any sort of hygiene until the bill gets too big. So those are some common ways that, especially in Windows environments, that we've seen companies sort of go astray. But yeah, our platform is designed to do exactly that. And if you want us to do a well-architected review or a cost optimization project, the first place we're going to go is that data. We're going to go get the data out of there and look at it because most of what we need to know is in that data. There's still a human aspect to it, right? Somebody has to understand the data and talk to the customer and understand what the applications are doing and what are the business ramifications. Like here's an interesting one. So you can save like 80, 90% if you use spot instances. Spot instances are just like regular instances, except that Amazon has the right to kick you off if they want to sell that instance to somebody else at a higher price. Okay, so it's like an auction. Some workloads, it doesn't matter if they get interrupted and then they resume later. Some workloads must never, ever be interrupted. And that's a big difference because if the workload is just some slow batch processing job, that it doesn't really matter when it finishes, and it doesn't really matter if it starts and stops 5 times or no times or 3 times in a day. Wow, you can save an enormous amount of money just by doing that. And it turns out there's a whole industry that's sort of cropped up around automating spot instance management because it's such a huge cost savings measure. And you're going to think, oh, that's way too complicated, but it's not. Because all this is so well orchestrated and automated and SaaSified, you don't need to know anything about APIs and all the like IAM stuff. You don't need any of that. All you need to do is pick the right platforms to build on top of, and have people helping you that have done it before, that know where to look. Because a lot of this, people don't know what to ask for when they come to us because they haven't seen it before, right? They haven't seen the application of data sciences and analytics and AI and ML to operations before. Like that, the first time I saw it, it completely baffled me and blew me away. But so we did some work around this for one of the cloud providers, Fortune 50 cloud provider, and it is amazingly effective. Like once you see it in operation, there's no going back. Similarly, once you get good at leveraging cloud technologies, especially for cost optimization, you're going to smack yourself in the forehead and say, why didn't I do this from day one? Look at all the money I could have saved over the last year if only I had taken the time to build on top of the AWS platform instead of just running VMs and pretending that it's my own data center. It's 9 out of 10, I would say, companies get this wrong, at least in our experience. Okay, next question. Well, we got a whole bunch of questions. Can I bring my existing Microsoft licenses for things like SQL Server and Windows, or do I need to buy new ones when I move to the cloud? I'm going to let AWS answer that because I don't actually know.
Yeah, absolutely. But it depends, when you had bought those licenses. But we offer a dedicated host option to bring licenses for Windows as well as SQL Server. So please, feel free to reach out to Cascadeo, and they can work with you and help you to bring your own licenses. There are lots of details which we need to know before we can give you a clear answer. But the short answer is yes, there is a way you can bring your licenses to AWS.
Excellent. All right. We've got a few minutes left, so we'll take another question here. This one. Can your solution identify unattached or orphan snapshots and determine if they have been used or accessed recently? There's not a native alerting function around that. That's much more of a kind of ongoing governance, cloud governance problem. And I think in the future, it's likely that we will have that sort of capability. Today, the way that we would solve that is with a partner product, right? So we would look at any of the available partner products or solutions. And if there's a cloud native solution that's built into the platform, that's usually what we would do. So one of our design principles is SaaS first, PaaS second, IaaS, but SaaS, PaaS, containers, IaaS, physical infrastructure is the least desirable typically. And in cases where there's not a good SaaS option, there's not a good PaaS option, usually you can find a third-party commercial off-the-shelf or open source solution because everybody has the same problems, right? Unless it's really unique to what your business does and you have something like you're building a new product or service, chances are good that someone's already put that out there. In fact, I'll give AWS a lot of credit. They have put an immense amount of intellectual property out there for free on the open internet. So when we go to build customer infrastructure, we go and look at their reference architectures, find the one that's the closest and say, good, now we have a starting point that we know has been battle tested and is certified and ready to go. And we're going to do the last 10% to modify it to get it where it needs to be instead of starting from zero. So orphan snapshots and stuff, that's part of the larger data governance and cloud governance problem. And we didn't really talk about cloud governance on this call, but that's another area where I think a lot of companies struggle because they don't know what they don't know and they're learning as they go. So one of the things that we like to try to help customers get set up with is good cloud governance. And usually there's a carrot, which is if you do things the right way, you get a bunch of benefits. Like if you're an employee, you get a bunch of things for free, like shared services. And if you deviate from the governance framework, like you leave a bunch of litter behind, like orphaned snapshots, there's a penalty. And usually the most effective penalty, I think, is where there's an immediate feedback loop. So if you do something that is wrong, and we'll define wrong as out of compliance, there's an immediate electric fence effect where you get zapped and you're immediately made aware that what you just did was not the right decision, right? So A common way that we see this implemented is if you launch a new EC2 instance in a production account that is not properly tagged, then it gets nuked out of orbit within 5 minutes. So within 5 minutes, it's destroyed. Why is that important? Because that could be someone doing something nefarious, like it could be a hacker or an intrusion or a Bitcoin miner or whatever. It could be somebody just trying to do their job, but going about it the wrong way. But more importantly, it means that you have the problem of untraceable cloud assets that you don't know who owns them, how important they are, if they need to be retained. Tagging is really the right way to fix this, right? And then AWS organizations is another one. So you can have more complex account structures where there's like a master billing account and then some subordinate accounts that are more departmental so that you can do a better job at cost allocating and also limiting the blast radius if something goes wrong on the security side. So, okay, next question. Does AWS fully support .NET Core on Linux? And are there any key limitations or constraints that we might need to know before migrating our app? I'll let the AWS folks tackle that one. .NET Core on Linux.
Yeah, absolutely. We fully support .NET Core on Linux, including the latest version of .NET Core 5.0. All our services like ECS or EKS or Fargate, they fully support our .NET Core on Linux. So without any hesitation, you can bring your .NET Core applications on AWS and can host them on using the Linux containers. Also, we offer a tool called porting assistant. So suppose if you don't have, if your applications are not on .NET Core, you can use porting assistant to migrate them from .NET Framework to .NET Core and can run under Linux containers. And you can save lots of money on Windows licensing.
All right. So we're almost at the top of the hour here. We got time for one more question before we wrap up and thank our guests from AWS for joining us. So the last question is, we have not yet moved to AWS. Is it possible to use Cascadeo.io before moving to the cloud? Great question. Yes, absolutely. You do not need to have anything in the cloud at all today to make use of it. In fact, if you're not even sure that you're going to move to the cloud, you can still make use of it. So it doesn't care where the telemetry comes from, right? It's just a generic analytics platform, and that's the beauty of it. You can start with your physical data center, and you can incrementally move things over. You can do a big bang migration to the cloud, not recommended, by the way. You can take 10 years to do it. You can run hybrid forever. It doesn't matter, right? Okay, we're gonna squeeze one last in here. Our IT monitoring is all over the map, different tools and used by different teams. Can you help us improve or replace this with something better? Yeah, so it's the same answer, right? So you have a bunch of monitoring tools. You need to figure out if you're monitoring everything correctly, like you're collecting all the data from all the things all the time. And then you need to get all that data into an analytics platform. So you can use Cascadeo.io, or you can build your own. You can use something like Datadog if you want to just do kind of visualization stuff. Like there's different ways to skin the cat, but the key theme is, harness the data that you're already collecting. And if you have sprawl of monitoring tools that are poorly tuned and poorly optimized, and they're noisy, and they, half the time they're false alarms, and half the time they miss the alarm, we can definitely help with that tuning, right? So typically part of our managed services engagements is perpetual tuning of monitoring and alerting. And then we can do it as a one-shot PS. So we've done that for companies where they've had us come in and do an independent study of their monitoring framework, tooling, operations. And then here's a recommendation, here's a roadmap, here's vendor options, here's budget for, I don't know if you're gonna buy a third-party commercial software platform. There's no one monitoring tool that solves all the problem, right? There's no silver bullet to this. The closest you're gonna find is to have a persistent analytics platform that all the data drains into, because the monitoring tools will keep coming and going. All right, so we're at the top of the hour. I wanna thank everyone who showed up for the meeting today. Had lots of attendees, appreciate that very much. Wanna thank our friends from AWS, Jignesh and Stephen, for joining us. And I hope everyone here has a fantastic day. Again, I'm Jared Reimer, and you can reach me at Jared, Jared, at Cascadeo.com, or just use info@Cascadeo.com, and the email will find its way to the right person. Thank you, and have a fantastic day. Take care, stay safe, get vaccinated. Thank you. Bye-bye.